Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Shavern. I'm the President and CEO of the Consumer Brands Association. We're very excited to welcome you back to our CPG Speaks series, thanks to the support of our very good friends at PwC. This series allows our industry to come together to learn important lessons from company leaders and really try to get to a place where you think differently about your own businesses. We've saved time at the end of today's session for questions from the audience. Please submit those using the Q&A panel at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So with that, I'm really excited to be joined by Jim Snee, Chairman of the Board, President and CEO of Hormel Foods Corporation. Today, Jim and I will be discussing the state of the business and industry, diving into a conversation around sustainability, workforce, and really concluding with some of Jim's thoughts about the consumer of today. Jim, we're super thrilled to have you join us today, and are we okay to dive in and get started?
Oh, absolutely, David. Thanks for having me. But before we do, let me welcome you.
Thank you.
We're incredibly excited as an association to have you joining the team. The team that you're now leading has done some incredible work over the last several years to put us into a really, really good position as an industry, as an association. And we're excited for your leadership over the next several years and to lead us on this journey. So welcome.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. For those of you who didn't know, I'm about 10 days into the job. So any mistakes I'll make will be entirely excused by that, but I've been thrilled to be here. I'm really optimistic not only about the industry, but about the organization and what we can do. So thank you very much. Listen, Hormel Foods has been in business for, just 131 years. And that's quite a milestone of success. And we're going to explore that a little bit, actually, that longevity and the perspectives it gives you and your company. But you know what many people may not know is that in this world where people job hop all the time, you actually began your career with the company right out of college. Can you talk a little bit about that? Tell us your story. What's about your path at Hormel and where you've ended up in the position you are today?
Sure, happy to do that. I always think that my story is a simple one. Some would probably say a bit boring, but it obviously has been a great career for me. So yeah, 131 years, and if I do the math, I'm coming up on my 34th anniversary with the company. So wow. I've been here about 25% of the time that the company's been in existence. Yeah. I didn't do that math until yesterday, David.
Sorry about that. I apologize.
But it gave me some different things to think about. But, I graduated from New Mexico State University and started with Hormel in June 5th, 1989. My first job, I was in Hayward, California, and I was a relief sales territory manager. And what that meant was all the work that the salespeople didn't want to do when they were working, they left for when they went on vacation and left Fantastic. It for the relief guy. But it's one of those things where, as I look back, the experiences that I got, being able at that time, really strong focus on retail, but to be in the stores, seeing what the work was, who was doing the work, where they were doing the work, just incredible learning. So, I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have had that experience, and then over the 34 years, it's been sales, marketing, sales management, branching off into areas like procurement, more general management roles. I led our international business for 4 years. And then, was fortunate enough to be named president at the end of 2015. So it has been an incredible journey. I'm not alone. We have a lot of people like me at Hormel Foods. But the other thing that I think is important to know is that we understand and appreciate the value of external experiences. And so, we never want to lose sight of the fact that there are others who know as much as we do, if not more, and have seen it differently. So there's been a concerted effort to find those external experienced hires so that they also can add value to the organization.
That's great. That's, by the way, there's so many fascinating parts to, starting out at the base level in organization, really understanding every level as you go up. But then also looking for those opportunities constantly for new learning and new inputs into the organization. It's a great and important story. So let's dive in. Let's start with the economy. From my perspective anyway, that it's really hard to get a consistent story about where the economy is right now. Obviously, inflation, fears about recession, supply chain challenges, labor, really evolving labor markets. I think there are we're going to talk more about this, but there are a number of long-term trends in labor markets that are just becoming apparent. And last year certainly has been something of a roller coaster ride for CPG industry broadly. And, how do you think about this at Hormel? How are you preparing, how you look at the year ahead, understanding the uncertainty is sort of baked into all this? How do you prepare a company for uncertainty in 2023? And when do you see maybe a more stable kind of set of circumstances showing up? If ever, by the way.
I think that's the right answer, but it is, it's so hard to say. I mean, you turn on the finance shows just like I do, and like so many people who are joining us today, and whoever you listen to, there's a nuanced opinion, a nuanced view about what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how severe it might be, or how severe it might not be. And I think from our perspective, the biggest thing that we really, really try to do, and our focus, the word we use a lot is balance.
Yep.
And so, our ability to think about the balance we have in our portfolio, where products are available in the store, how products are priced for consumers, channels that we want to compete in with a concerted effort to build out those channels. That's what's really allowed us over time to weather these economic storms as well as we have. And again, you go back to the portfolio, and there's a good healthy dose of premium offerings. We also have a number of items targeted at more value consumers, and whether a consumer wants to eat at home or go out to eat in the food service channel. A really well-developed business there as well. So it is very intentional. It's very thoughtful on our behalf when we strategize about the business. And we think that the balance is something that we have talked a lot about. We'll continue to talk about it because it's really important to us. We don't ever want to find ourselves in a situation where we're so far out of whack, or the market dynamics or condition, we're on the other side of the spectrum entirely.
Yeah, so you're really investing some degree in optionality, right? Optionality in terms of your product mix, in terms of how you're distributing, so that you can respond to all sorts of different circumstances. It's what it sounded.
Yeah, exactly. Like. I mean, if you think about, the pandemic is a great example. We talk a lot about a third of our business is in the food service channel. And we all know what happened in the early days, right? The food service industry was devastated. Had we been 100% food service company, that would have been tough to deal with, and the inverse or the reverse is true as well. So, like I said, it is optionality but it's very thoughtful and intentional to make sure we continue to build our business in that manner.
So let's take that also to the supply chain challenges. Obviously, at CBA, we talk a lot about supply chain challenges for a good reason. It's a big problem. How are you seeing that? Obviously, there was supply chain challenges in extremis during COVID, right? And we've been subject to sort of the waves of that after the. How are you feeling about the current sets of supply chains, both in terms of inputs into you and delivering your product? what are the challenges remain, and how are you thinking about addressing those challenges in the year ahead?
Yeah, I think for us, we talk a lot about them, having improved, continuing to improve, but still not perfect. In the short term, especially, it's still a labor issue, and the labor issue, we've talked about it a lot in CBA. I mean, it's changed. There was a while when we just couldn't find labor, and it's less now about finding the labor or getting the applicants. It's really about retaining, the people that you are bringing in and hiring. And the conversations, that I have with peers, it seems like that 90-day mark seems to really be that magical milestone where if you can keep a team member for those first 90 days, chances are they're going to stay with you for a while. But we're dealing with the externalities of very low unemployment, plentiful jobs with increasing wages. So the competitive dynamic is different than we've seen. So it's forced us to think differently about some of the things that we're doing in terms of making sure that potential new team members really understand the work environment that they may be getting themselves into. Making sure they have an instant connection when they do start working with the company, so that there's not unanswered questions or concerns, that they've got a buddy system right off the bat. And then we continue to look at challenges that so many places in the U.S. have, whether it's available housing or daycare. Those are all things that are on our radar that we continue to try to solve for as well. But I think short term, it will continue to be a labor story. In the longer term, it'll be about technology and innovation and automation. Not words that are new to any of us, but I do feel like there's this movement, a more concerted effort to say, how do we accelerate those initiatives? And this isn't going to be something that is workforce replacement, right? This is something that's just going to become a necessary part of our workforce formula going forward. And so some of it's automation that doesn't even exist. And so we've got to work with manufacturers and with industry to become more automated and to become more innovative. So I think we're going to see that effort accelerate in the longer term.
That's so interesting. I mean, one of the things I think that the media has gotten somewhat wrong about the labor story is the framing all around the pandemic. Now, there were absolutely labor dislocations related to pandemic, very significant ones. But things like dropping labor force participation rates has been going on a long time, right? Yes. And one, we have to think as a country and as a culture as to why there's these dropping labor force participation rates. Are there underlying elements there that, as a macro policy level, we can try to adjust? But frankly, there's an element of what you're describing from a business perspective of trying to just operationally engage with the facts that it's harder to get labor, and that may continue for a while, right? Yeah, it is. And I think the issue of workforce participation was one that it wasn't on my radar. Yeah. I think the pandemic certainly brought that to light because of the severity of what happened. But now when you go back and you look at the historical charts and you see the slope of the line, it's apparent that it was happening, and it was going to hit us in a way that was bigger and more difficult down the line. It accelerated it, during COVID. So, and that's why I say I don't think the work that we'll do with technology and automation is going to be workforce replacement. Yeah. Just through the simple math of that declining workforce participation, it's just going to have to be an integral part of the workforce formula. So interesting. I mean, if you don't, I'm going to grab hold of a little piece of that, if you don't mind, while we're in the, on the technology side. I think it's kind of a confusing time because everything's moving in every direction at once. I mean, certainly you're looking at straight up automation certainly in a manufacturing base, or automation on the factory floor. You're looking at data, having good data capacities, both about your operations, about your customers, and the rest. And then certainly the whole media and communications set. In terms of the CPG industry broadly, I guess it sounds to me like you think we're going to be moving into a space where there's going to be a lot of technology investment. I mean, there always has been, but I mean, we're leaning into a period of a lot of technology investment in the CPG side, certainly in the food side, CPG broadly.
Yeah, I do think so. I think there's already been, we're an example of, some of the platforms that we've worked on, taking them to the cloud, whether it was through our HR or accounting and finance, and now focusing on supply chain. But, again, I think if we're honest with ourselves, there's a lot of, not just our industry in general, that's running on platforms that are becoming more and more difficult to support. And it doesn't mean that the platform's a bad platform. It's back to this whole workforce issue. If you have fewer and fewer people wanting to support those older technologies, maybe because they're not cool, they're not what I learned in school, right? Then it becomes harder and harder to support those platforms. And so you do have to evolve into the more modern platforms where you have the resources to support them and to update them. And so I think there's, a lot of our companies in the space have been on a journey to do that. But I do think there'll be, a more concerted, accelerated effort to get there faster, because, we all sat back and watched what happened to Southwest Airlines.
Yeah.
And, they just happened to be the company. I don't see, it wasn't just a Southwest Airlines issue. I think there were a lot of eyes that were opened through that whole scenario.
Yeah, and you see this across a lot of industries where companies or even industries make a big technological jump, right? And then they can kind of stall out there, right? Oh, we invested in this new system. In reality, it's a kind of continuous journey where you're always having to disrupt yourself at some level, which is difficult and painful and expensive. Super incredibly interesting. Let's go back and talk about the changing nature of the consumer, if you will. I know you have at Hormel a really thoughtful and cool group, if I can say that, inside. That's really kind of an internal think tank that thinks about innovation, insights, and I was told you even have a cultural anthropologist on your team, which is totally cool. I want to meet that person. What are you hearing from them about sort of the changing nature of the consumer today and sort of where they're going? Again, you don't want to get locked into a fixed idea about the consumer, right? Because even faster than ever, the consumer's tastes, preferences are changing. What's your process for thinking about that? How you see the consumer changing over time?
Sure. Well, let's start with the cultural anthropologist. Maybe we'll send her to your house.
Great.
What we love about the work that she does is it really allows us to understand, what the consumer says they do versus what they actually do. And that has provided so many great insights for us over time. But this group that we have, Brand Fuel, right? What a great title, right?
Great.
I want to lead Brand Fuel. But it's a combination of really, overall brand marketing. It's what we call our digital experience group. So it's not just e-commerce, it is digital marketing. it is consumer insights, really all coming together in that same area, because there is so much commonality when we think about the business and think about the consumer. And the word that is emanating from that organization the most right now is experiential. And it is, thinking about how this consumer wants to have and be proud of the experience that the brands they use create. And it happens in a number of different ways, right? It can be, making sure they know how to use the brand, make sure that the packaging is responsible packaging for them. It could be for philanthropic reasons, certainly, other ESG reasons. But I think the biggest thing to know is, and we all know this, is that brands do create experiences, right? Sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're not, but we have to make sure that, we understand the consumer really wants that experience, that positive experience with brands. And that doesn't mean that some of the table stakes like flavor, the price value relationship, convenience, that those things go away. I mean, that's always going to be important to the consumer. This is kind of that next generation stuff. And so how do we make sure as brand stewards that we're allowing our consumers to be proud of the experience that our brands create for them?
That's really interesting. And that as you know, I spent last number of years of my life deep, involved in sort of new media, social media spaces, talking about a lot. And the what you hear there is the word community a lot. People want to be part of something, and that which also goes to brand, right? They want brands that reflect what they view as their values, and they want to be attached to those brands, and sort of connecting people throughout that whole journey is really important. But also, frankly, probably when you have historic brands who've been around a long time, it's figuring out how to fit into that story, I would think, right? How to create that new story.
Yeah, it is, and it's making sure that you're staying up to date with the consumer and not just relying on your past experiences or your past success. And we've got both sides of the spectrum when we think about a brand like Spam, and I'm sure my counterparts at Consumer Brands are probably tired of me talking about it. But, here's a brand that's been around for over 80 years. And, we're having, more success this past year than we ever have. And it's, by engaging with the consumer and making sure that the experiences we create are ones that make them proud of the brand and the purchase that they made. On the other side, we have some more contemporary brands like Applegate or Justin's, that I think consumers are proud of in just maybe a different way. Yeah. And so really understanding that is so important. And that's why for us, having an organization like Brand Fuel that really can parse those issues apart, really, really important.
Great. Thank you. Let's shift a little bit, talk a little more about ESG and sustainability goals. I know, Hormel's consistently ranked among the top corporate citizens in the world. I know that Hormel Foods has some pretty lofty goals as regards to, again, climate change and packaging and sustainability. I think you've even looked at regenerative agricultural investments. Share a little bit about how you approach these issues. And in particular, there's goal setting, but then there's operationalizing, right? There's something about setting important, audacious goals, and there's something important about that act. But then you have to go from those goals and really changing how you do things to meet them. Talk a little bit about your journey, how you think about these things, and then how you operationalize those goals at the company.
Yeah, and there's a lot there, right? We all understand the complexity and the ever-changing environment of the ESG world, right? We're all working towards a certain number of science-based targets. We're all trying to follow, some of the guidelines from the United Nations. And those are really, really important areas. And so what we've really tried to do, David, is some of those items, again, they're table stakes when we think about, the climate and energy and water use, right? Those are things, again, not new to us and not new to many people on the call, things that we've always been working on, probably a little bit more formalization.
Yeah.
And so you didn't really have to remobilize people to do that. It was just more of, in my mind, formalizing some of it. But then there's also some of these areas that are more aspirational in nature, and so for us, two of the things that we've been keenly focused on the social side have been hunger and education.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you do have to make sure that, the organization is aligned around those goals and aspirations, but then also finding ways to bring people along, because the teams really want to be part of those types of initiatives, where they can feel that they're making a change, whether it's in a community or society at large. And I think that's something that we've been able to do really, really well, is communicate to the team what our priorities are, and then helping those team members find ways to get engaged, to get involved, to really make a difference. And that's when those initiatives gain traction and become really powerful. And it's also thinking about, how do we weave these throughout our business, right? You can't have ESG be this, it can't be, an entity unto itself that sits in an office or a conference room, right? It does have to become part of the company and the culture. And that's easy to say, and it's hard to do, but it's something that, again, we've spent a lot of time and effort on, making sure that we're bringing the organization along with us.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it ties to the earlier conversation about things like technology, right? If you get to a new moment of, we're going to invest in new technological solutions, if you've really embedded those goals into your culture, then you're going to end up with systems. Those new investments will not only help with efficiency and all the rest, but help with your whole sets of goals, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's. I'm going to have another issue area really about your culture I want to explore, but I just want to give people a heads up that, we're then going to move into questions in a few minutes. So if you have questions, please get them in. Someone told me that a few years ago, Hormel gave stock to every single team member in the company, 20,000 plus, including team members around the world and in China, in other places. That's, I think, great and pretty remarkable. You also share profits with team members and have programs such as the Inspired Pathways program, where you give free college education to children of your team members. And I've heard you've used the word uncommon when talking about your culture. That's super fast in and of itself. I want to hear about that. I think it's powerful. What is your thinking? What's your recipe behind how you build this culture, how you maintain it? And then kind of circling back to our earlier conversation, if you've only got 90 days to really hook somebody, how do you kind of hook them into the culture? How do you think about the culture you're building and bringing people into it?
Yeah, boy, there's a lot there. One of the things that we talk a lot about is it starts with our corporate office and the town we're based in, right? I mean, we're in Austin, Minnesota, southern Minnesota, a town of 25,000 people, and now over $12 billion company, right? So it's, small town, big company, but I'll tell you, really big heart.
Yeah.
And so this culture that we really try to build is what we call a culture of accountability. Yeah. Right? That we, as individuals, we hold ourselves accountable. As team members, we hold each other accountable. And as a company, as an organization, we have to hold the company accountable. And, that connection, that accountability is something that we find people really want to have, right? That's what connects them to others. That's what connects them to the company. And then when you can layer on what we believe, are some of these more uncommon programs or initiatives. And, for us, it always starts with not just writing a check,
Yeah.
right? We always say, can we write checks? Sure. Can we write a lot of checks? Yep. And we can write big checks, but you really don't get that connection. And so whether it's, the Inspired Pathways program you mentioned, it wasn't just helping students go to and get a 2-year education. It was helping them with the paperwork, helping them with the applications. It could be translation in some cases, but really coming alongside them and guiding them on this journey for us is what made that uncommon and different. And so now, today we have hundreds of kids that are in college because of these programs. And think about the culture and the link then that you're able to connect with team members. And then that sense of belonging, so you said 90 days is a short period of time.
Yeah.
And, I think we all know that the decision's made well before 90 days, whether I belong here or not. And so how do you make sure you're creating that right environment? Like I said, maybe it is giving them a tour of the facility so they know what they're getting themselves into, having that buddy on day one, somebody they can talk to and ask questions of. Those are the things that, we like to think about, and we like to do the work. And that's the difference between writing the check and then doing the work. When you do the work, it really helps you understand what's meaningful and what matters.
So important. And I've read a bunch of your stuff, and one of the things I really love is you talk a lot about trust. I think that is a word that does not get enough attention as it should, in the sense that kind of societally, where a lot of people are in kind of low trust environments. They spend a lot of time online, which is a low trust environment. They're not as attached to communities as they were. There's a lot of social isolation, other kinds of low trust spaces, and how important it is for institutions at all level, but businesses in particular, to build trust with customers, with employees, with partners, and really convey a sense of trust and stability. I know you've written a lot about that, and if you have any thoughts about how you start, it's a big topic, but how you go down that role, I just tell you I think that's a really important concept.
Well, it is, and we go back to the summit we had in the fall, and Linda and I had a chance to do the trust panel, which was a great experience. And I'm a pretty simple guy that when people say, what does it mean? It's all about doing what you say you're going to do. And and it's not just at work, it's not with your company, it's right with your family, it's in the community. And we can all think of experiences where people haven't done what they said they were going to do, and how that trust factor drops in a hurry. And so as we think about how do we apply that to customers, to our brands, right, to our communities, those are really powerful promises that you make. And when you don't live up to them, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It's how did you handle not living up to that promise? And so again, if we all think back over the last 3 years, I'm sure there were plenty of times where we had difficulty living up to all of the promises that we were making, just because we couldn't get everything that we needed. But then it becomes more that communication and transparency factor, and handling that up front, that, when do you're not going to be able to live up to that promise, and what are you doing about it? I think, for us, that's how we think about that, going back to the culture of accountability that says, I'm accountable for this customer, I'm accountable for this production. And how am I going to, when I see something that's not happening the way it's supposed to, how am I going to help and be accountable to other team members? Again, easy to say, hard to do. And that's where it's just got to be, you've got to have the rigor within the organization to embed that.
That's great. Listen, thank you very much for that. So, you're a popular guy for questions. So we got a number of questions here from the audience. Let's start. Let's start with one. Listen, the comment is, thanks for your time. What is your take on the future of healthier snacks?
I mean, I think there's a lot of runway for healthier snacks. You know, snacking as a category, as an occasion, is one that was, largely uninterrupted during the pandemic. I think there's runway for traditional snacks, and I think there's runway for healthier snacks as well. We've spent a lot of time and effort on entertaining in our snacking platform. We've had a number of brands and businesses that have competed in that space. We made the acquisition of Planters, which really is a great kind of foundational brand for our snacking and entertaining initiative. So, I mean, we see a bright future in that space, and we've invested in it for growth over the foreseeable future.
Great. Question was, what's Hormel's hybrid work policy in 2023, and how are you thinking about, Frank, how are you thinking about corporate real estate going forward? I'm not sure how much you can think about that. I think everybody's got that kind of front of mind, but how are you thinking about place and work for employees?
Yeah, sure. So we've, gosh, I got to think about the timing here now, David, but we've had our team members back to the offices for quite some time. And, we asked them to come back 4 days a week. Fridays, we said that's kind of the work your way day, whether that's in the office or if that's remote. Really tried hard to accommodate employees' preferences by making Friday meetings all virtual, whether you're in the office or not. And I think we've had good success. The highlight for me, of course, I've got my old man hat on, is I love walking out.
I'll wear it with you.
Walking out in the office and you see the people and you feel the energy, the vibrancy. There is just something different about that. And if, are we at 4 days? I would say probably not. We're not taking attendance. We're not looking at scan cards. We have to remember that people are in meeting rooms and they are traveling again. But I would say that, we're probably somewhere in that 3 to 4 day a week range in terms of how team members are showing up. In terms of real estate, we haven't made any changes to our properties or anything like that. We have been working over time to make sure some of our offices are more updated and open and more accommodating for team members.
That's good. That's great. I mean, I think this is a journey essentially I could say all companies, but all organizations are on in terms of finding that new place and when people are in their office, making sure that's a high value experience, which it can be, but it may not be. It may not be the 5 day a week thing that we grew up with. So one last one. There are many great companies in the CPG industry, and thank you for this, and no doubt part of the CPA. Thank you. And while CPG companies compete for the consumer dollar, there are some things that should be non-competitive. I'm just reading the question, such as environmental stewardship, packaging improvements, product safety, and even social issues. How does Hormel Foods think about these non-competitive items?
Amen. I couldn't agree more, right? These are perfect examples of where we are absolutely better together. And when we think about leveraging, resources, in some cases limited resources, the power of the association or the organization really is what's going to impact change. An area that, for me personally, it's near and dear to our heart, being a food company, is food insecurity. Yep. And when we think about, food insecurity rates that really, are not declining at the rate they should, how do we come together as an industry, as an association, to affect change? And again, it goes back to my earlier comment. We all have dollars or checks that we write, and those are great. But I think when we think about the power, the capacity of the companies, and really getting aligned behind these causes that we know are important to our future, they do need to be non-competitive, and we need to think about how we organize ourselves to be more effective, because it is the most powerful change, comes from, in my opinion, from companies, because we have the wherewithal to get things done.
That's great. Jim, this has been a fantastic discussion. Any final thoughts for the group before we go? But I just want to say, I just really appreciate you doing this and the time.
Oh, it's always a lot of fun. And, back to where I started, David, we're excited to have you. I think it's important for all of us to hear, some of these topics we've talked about for the last several years, but I think just hearing how different companies, how different leaders are thinking about these things are very important. I always learn something new from my peers, from my friends, from my counterparts, because there's just so many smart people in the association, in the industry. But I really appreciate being part of this, having the opportunity to share. And I look forward to learn from some of my other peers as the year progresses.
Fantastic. Listen, again, from all of us on this Zoom, and for all of us in the industry, thank you for not only for doing this, but everything you do for the industry and for your community and for the country. It's incredible. And I just want to thank everybody who's joined us today for CPG Speaks. And please join us again, because we're going to keep having really insightful discussions like this with great corporate leaders like Jim. Again, very much appreciate it. Jim, thank you again. Take care, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.